Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, but before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, and that's to, get your comment, to stand out of all of the other comments in the chat. So we greatly appreciate that, and I make sure to highlight that during the stream. And then for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network, and that is where you can find all the exclusive content from not just my podcast, but the other podcasts as well here on the GSMC Sports Network. A bunch of the baseball ones and football ones are up there now, so make sure to go check that out as well. We got a lot to talk about on today's show. We'll start off by recapping last night's game between the Vikings and the 49ers, so I have a lot of thoughts about that. Then we'll get into the next segment. We'll talk about some teams that are struggling right now, what the issues are. So we'll get into that in the next segment. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Baltimore Ravens and how far they can go this season after getting a huge win over the Lions, a blowout win over the Lions, 38-6. So we'll talk about them. And then in the final part of the show, we'll go over the current standings as they are right now after Week 7. So that's what we got on tap for today. So let's get right into the first part of the show, which is recapping last night's game between the 49ers and the Vikings. So the Vikings, an upset win, 22-17 over the 49ers. So obviously, after the show I came out with, obviously after the show I come out with shorts. So I did my shorts for the baseball podcast because obviously we don't have that till Friday. So I last night was both championship series games, Game 6 in the National League and Game 7 in the American League. And then, of course, you had this game last night. Last night, I had the Niners winning, of course. I had the Astros winning, and I had the Phillies winning. And guess what? All three of those teams lost. So, going forward, whatever predictions that I may have for games, just go with the opposite. Because, ever since I've been doing predictions for the NFL on this show, I've been terrible. And I guess you could say I might be one of the reasons why the Niners lost last night, because I went with them. And I gave the Vikings really no chance, especially because the Niners were coming off of a loss against the Browns in Cleveland. And I thought this was going to be a get-right game for them because the Vikings, obviously they won last week against the Bears, but, I just still didn't look at them as a good team. And I thought, going up against the 49ers, Kirk Cousins on Monday night, he was going to struggle. And, the Niners were going to win pretty easily, right? But that was not the case. That was not the case last night. So the Vikings got the ball to start the game. Alexander Madison started off the game with, I believe, a 19-yard run. So I was like, okay, didn't expect that. The Vikings, next two plays, no gain, and then an interception on the third play. So 49ers got the ball, and I'm like, all right, well, here we go. This is going to be pure domination. Niners are driving. Looks like they're going to score on this drive, and then Christian McCaffrey fumbles right after that. And I'm like, okay, well, Vikings are backed up, so, the Niners, all they got to do is just stop them here, get the ball back. And then the Vikings proceeded to go on a 10-play, 89-yard drive that took over 6 minutes and ended up getting a touchdown Kirk Cousins connected with Jordan Addison for 20 yards for a touchdown. And it was 7-0 Vikings. And I'm sitting there going, okay, didn't really expect that. That's not good. And then the Niners got the ball back. They went down the field, 10 plays, 53 yards. And Moody missed another field goal from 40 yards out. And I'm like, okay, that is not good. Vikings then proceeded to go up 10-0. But then the Niners put together a nice drive, 12 plays, 75 yards, 6.5 minutes. This is in the second quarter. Christian McCaffrey ended up scoring yet another touchdown, rushing touchdown from 3 yards out. So it was 10-7. So I'm like, okay, now the Niners, they look like they're going to, get back into this game, and they're probably going to win it. They just got off to a rough start. Then the Vikings got the ball back. Not a lot of time left. And it looked like there was going to be another interception when Kirk Cousins was throwing to Jordan Addison. But Addison was able to rip it away and score a 60-yard touchdown right before the end of the half. And that put the Vikings up 16-7. They missed the extra point. Niners come out of this and punt in the second half. Vikings kick another field goal. Christian McCaffrey scored a touchdown on the following drive. A 35-yard passing touchdown by Brock Purdy, even though that was really all McCaffrey on that play. Vikings kicked a field goal. Niners kicked a field goal. And then in the fourth quarter, we had Vikings punting. Brock Purdy threw a pick. Vikings got the ball, missed a field goal. Brock Purdy threw another pick to end the game. And that was it. Vikings won 22-17. Yeah, Kirk Cousins had a great game. 35 for 45, 378 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. That was obviously at the beginning of the game. Vikings still didn't. I mean, they ran the ball a little bit better, but they still not great. Madison 39 yards rushing, Akers 31 yards rushing. They ran for a grand total of 74 yards. Jordan Addison was the star last night. 7 receptions for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. T.J. Hawkinson had 11 receptions for 86 yards. He got banged up in this game. Him and Addison actually had to leave the games at points during the game because they got hurt. Addison trying to make a catch and got his foot trapped underneath. I think it was Ward. I think that's who, because that's who got the pick to start the game, and then the Addison touchdown, and the same thing. It was them fighting for the ball, and Addison was able to win that battle that time. But yeah, he got hurt in this game, but he came back in. Him and Hawkinson both came back in. Brandon Powell, he had 4 receptions for 64 yards. KJ Osborne had 5 for 47. Yeah, I mean, a great game for Kirk Cousins, really. He was unbelievable. Brock Purdy last night, 21 of 30, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Niners really didn't run the ball that well. McCaffrey was their leading rusher for 45 yards and a touchdown. George Kittle was their leading receiver. He had 78 yards receiving. Brandon Ayuk had 57. Juwan Jennings had 54. McCaffrey had 51. Again, the 35-yard touchdown was a big chunk of his receiving yards. But yeah, I mean, the big story is here. Niners defense was very bad last night. Outside of the interception, I mean, they didn't sack Kirk Cousins at all. I thought that was like my biggest takeaway from that game is, or one of them, is the fact that the 49ers did not sack Kirk Cousins once. And that offensive line for the Niners really held up. It did. Or for the Vikings, it held up. And I really didn't think it was. I mean, Kirk Cousins did not. I mean, there was at one point during the game where they should have sacked him. It was towards the end, and he was able to get out of it, and they didn't get him. And yeah, I mean, if you want to look at the weakness of the 49ers, I guess the secondary is a problem. But then again, you got the front seven is always getting to the quarterback, so it really doesn't matter. But last night it did matter because, I mean, the Vikings picked apart that Niners defense last night. I mean, the Vikings, they only punted, I think, once in this game. Yeah, they only punted once in this game. That was it. I mean, they had the turnover early, but the missed field goals, the interception. But other than that, they scored touchdowns. They did. I mean, they did kick field goals, but still, like they only punted one time, and yeah, the Niners just couldn't get any stops, especially on third down too. Like the Vikings were really good on third down last night. I mean, anytime you thought, okay, all they got to do is get one more stop, and that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the what the percentage was on third down. Because I was watching First Take and they went over it. Let's see if I can find. I don't know why I'm having. All right, here we go. Yeah, so third down efficiency, Vikings were 8 for 13. Niners were 5 for 9. But the Vikings had a total of 452 yards against the Niners defense. They won time of possessions. They had the ball for 34, or well, almost 35 minutes, 34-56 to the Niners, 25-04. They picked up 24 first downs in this game. I mean, I was very surprised by this game. I really was. But this kind of raises a lot of questions now, with Brock Purdy because he threw 2 bad interceptions, especially the one at the end of the game. And, he was out without Deebo Samuel. There was no Trent Williams. So, the last 2 games have not been great for the Niners. And they got, Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner got banged up in this game, but they returned to the game. So, at least that's good. But, yeah, this was definitely a very bad loss for the Niners. Everybody's now, for the people talking about Brock Purdy being a system quarterback, well, they could definitely use this for their argument because he was not good last night. He wasn't. And, again, he's not the main reason they lost. He is one of the reasons why they lost, but I wouldn't say he's the main reason. I mean, the defense just couldn't get off the field on third down. They missed a field goal. McCaffrey fumbling. I mean, there's a lot of things you could point at besides him, but yeah, I mean, the 2 turnovers, that was bad. That was bad. But, I give props to the Vikings because, again, I'm one of those people that counted them out, especially with their best receiver, being placed on IR, and Justin Jefferson. But Jordan Addison stepped up. Kirk Cousins played really well with really no running game. Even though they did run the ball better, but still, they won the game by throwing the ball last night. And that was against a good team on Monday night. And that's something that he's struggled with in the past. So the Vikings now are 3-4, and they're kind of back in the conversation for, that last spot, for the wild card in the NFC. And then as for the Niners, these last 2 weeks have been bad. I'm not going to say that, to go into a full-on panic with them, but I definitely would be a little bit concerned because, especially, you look at their field goal kicker, and I know, he made, a 50-yarder last night, but, he did miss one early, and, last week he missed some kicks as well, so, that's something to be concerned about, and the secondary, too. I mean, they got picked apart. When they didn't get any pressure on Kirk Cousins, they got picked apart last night. And, if they go up against the Eagles, you don't get any pressure on Jalen Hurts, that's going to be a problem. And especially, in the playoffs, you go up against some of these better teams besides the Eagles because the Eagles are going to be there. If you don't get pressure, is your back end going to hold up? It did not hold up last night. So, So Vikings pick up a win. They improved to 3-4. Niners dropped to 5-2. So we'll see what happens next week. The Packers, they will be playing the Vikings. Well, the Vikings will be playing the Packers in Lambeau next week. And then for the 49ers, they got the Bengals coming to town next week. So that's a big game there. So with that, we're going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, I'm going to give you my thoughts on, the 49ers still and some other teams that are struggling as well. specifically the Buffalo Bills. So that'll be what we talk about when we get back from our first break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about teams that are currently struggling right now. Also, I'd like to add just like coming off of a bad loss and where they go from here. So obviously the Niners last night, continuing the discussion there. They just didn't look good last night, and I mean I guess you could consider they are struggling because you lose to the Browns last week with a backup quarterback on the road, and then this week, you lose against a team that kind of was like reeling a little bit. I mean, they did win, but against the Bears. They're missing their best wide receiver. They got a quarterback that's very bad in prime time, specifically Monday Night Football. I mean, Kirk Cousins is coming in at 2-10. And they got picked apart. Their defense got picked apart. And the Niners are arguably the best defense in football. And last night they did not play like that at all. I mean, they got little to no pressure on Kirk Cousins, no sacks. I mean, I was surprised by, again, what happened last night. And Brock Purdy turned the ball over twice. The Niners turned the ball over 3 times. There's definitely some concerns there. And, myself included, everybody's looking at them as like, hey, they're by far the best team right now in the NFL. And, since then, like these last 2 weeks, they have been very bad. Back-to-back weeks scoring only 17 points. Their quarterback is turning the ball over. I mean, and again, last night the defense just was awful. So it definitely concerns there moving forward. But, right now they're dealing with some injuries, of course, on the offensive side. You got Deebo Samuel, who's going to miss some games. Wasn't playing last night. Trent Williams, I wasn't playing last night either, I don't think. So, they're banged up a little bit. And, I think the Niners will be fine, but it's definitely a problem. These last 2 games have definitely been eye-opening, been a little concerning. Especially because I did a topic on Brock Purdy and, talking about how, people view him as a system quarterback. And I didn't want to, label him as that. But I did say, I definitely did say, with Deebo being out and, even if, McCaffrey did play, but, Deebo being out and you don't have your left tackle, I mean, we'll see what he's made of, and McCaffrey had 2 touchdowns last night, but, didn't really do much in the ground game. He did have the 35-yard touchdown, but other than that, really, he fumbled, didn't really have his typical, Christian McCaffrey game, other than, scoring touchdowns, but didn't have a ton of yards. Niners really, didn't do that much on offense, and Brock Purdy threw 2 picks. And, they had a chance to win the game at the end. Greg Joseph missed the field goal. But, Purdy throws the pick to end the game. And now that's 2 interceptions now last night. And obviously he threw one last week. So, I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned there. In the comments section, everybody's talking about, yeah, he looked like Jimmy G last night. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't good. Wasn't good. But I think, like, really the bigger concern for me is the Niners defense because, they didn't get any pressure on Kirk Cousins, and like I said, he picked them apart. You know, so that yeah, I mean, again, it's a long season. These type of things are going to happen, but you go up against some of these better teams in the playoffs, and you don't get pressure on their quarterback. You know, that's a problem. That's a problem. So the Niners right now, they've lost 2 straight. They play the Bengals now, who are coming off of a bye, who are rested. So that's a team that could throw the ball. And if they don't get pressure on Burrow, you know, yeah, you got to deal with Chase. You got to deal with Higgins, who hasn't had a good year, and Boyd, of course. But yeah, that's not gonna be easy. Now you're back at home, so you at least have that. But yeah, that Niners right now, these last 2 games. I mean, back-to-back road games too, which isn't easy, but that definitely something to be concerned about moving forward. And then for the other team that's struggling right now is the Buffalo Bills. With them, I mean, they've been struggling to get it going offensively. And one of the things that many of them are complaining about, including one of my friends who's a Bills fan, is the offensive coordinator. One of the things is also that Josh Allen's not taking off and running with the ball. That's what they're saying. Now, for me, Josh Allen, I think, is still the best runner on the team. I mean, James Cook's actually having a good year. I mean, he had a receiving touchdown the other day. He's been having a good season for them. But I think for most people, they would agree that Josh Allen is still the best runner on this team. And listen, for me, I think Josh Allen running the ball at times, like, they need to pull back on it a little bit. But the thing is, I don't think they should be going all in on one way as opposed to the other. Like, yeah, like, you don't want to see Josh Allen running too much and getting himself hurt because, listen, he could end up being like Cam Newton where you take too many hits and then that just, affects your career long term. You don't want to see that. But at the same time, it's like, you don't want to take that out of his game completely. Like, that's a part of his game. That's what makes him special. One of his attributes that makes him special. So when you take that all away, I mean, you don't want to make him a one-dimensional player. Because listen, I like to, I've made fun of the Bills in the past and called them the Buffalo one-dimensionals because they don't run the ball. And the fact that Josh Allen was their best running back, and again, I still think he is, but you can't take that away from him completely. You just gotta pull back on it a little bit. Like, let him run a little bit because it's part of his game. The Bills, I mean, they've been struggling to get it going. I don't know what it is. Are they still like on that, London time? What's going on? I mean, they waited till the end of the game against the Jags to get it going in London. Against the Giants, they didn't score any points till the fourth quarter. And again, against the Patriots, you're down 10-0. Patriots go down the field and kick a field goal to start the game, and Josh Allen throws a pick right away on the first play. And then again, they couldn't get it going until the second half. They took the lead, but then the Bills defense let Mac Jones go down the field and score a touchdown with no time left to Mike Gesicki. And that was it. Now, again, I think the Bills are going to be fine. I'm not worried. I mean, again, like the Niners, I'm concerned. Not worried, even though those are kind of like similar words. But I don't know. Is worried worse than concerned? I have there's some concerns with both teams. I mean, Mac Jones looked terrible this whole year, and he had his best game against them, against their defense. So that's a problem. I think these two teams, though, the 49ers and the Bills, are going to be fine. I would definitely say I'm a little more worried with the Bills than I am the Niners. I mean, because I look at the Niners as still like the best team in the NFC. But the Eagles are definitely like right there with them. especially after these last 2 weeks. But the Bills, Josh Allen turning the ball over, and them getting off to these slow starts. I mean, if you really look at it, both teams are kind of having similar a couple weeks, getting off. Well, Niners, they got off to a fast start last week against the Browns. They scored first. But last night was the first time they didn't score first, I think, this season. So, but the Bills, I mean, they just take forever to get it going. And then when they get it going, it's too late. But again, they had the lead against the Patriots and they blew it. So, but I think, for the Bills, you're still a game behind the Dolphins. The Dolphins, I have concerns with them, obviously, when they go up against better teams on the road. Against the Bills, losing by 28, and then losing the other night by a couple scores to the Eagles. There's some concerns there, definitely. For the Lions, I mean, they got blown out on the road against the Ravens, who we'll talk about in the next segment. So, there's some concerns there as well, especially for them, playing better teams on the road. But, I mean, overall, you look at, what's happened this year, you have no idea. You have no idea from week to week, really, because, I mean, every team could be beat. I mean, right now, the best team in the NFL to me is the Kansas City Chiefs. I would say that. The Niners, I think, are the best team in the NFC still. But Eagles definitely are right there with them. And we'll see how it is when they play against each other. But right now, I would say the Chiefs are the best team in the NFL because they had their bad loss against the Lions, and they could have easily won that game. If it wasn't for Kadarius Toney dropping passes and allowing that ball to get tipped up and picked off by Brian Branch, that got taken, to the house for a pick six. If the Chiefs receivers would have caught the ball, they win that game, and they're undefeated right now. So, there's a lot of teams you look at that, every team really can be beatable, is beatable. It's just got to be there, right place, right time, really. I mean, the Niners the last 2 weeks look like a very beatable team. The Eagles, I mean, they're still turning the ball over. So that's something to be concerned about. The Lions and the Dolphins against good teams on the road. The Bills taking forever to, get it going offensively. All the teams that we look at is the A-S tier teams in the league, they all can be beat. And that's why the other thing too is home field advantage is going to be as always going to be very important. You want to have home games in the playoffs. Because for some of these teams, they're very good teams, but if they're on the road against, if they got to go to Arrowhead, you got to go to Philadelphia, you got to go to San Francisco, got to go to Buffalo. I don't know if you're going to win. Or you got to go to Miami, whatever it is. You got to go to Baltimore. It's going to be tough. For some of these teams. So, but let me know what you guys think about, some of these teams that are struggling, some of these teams that, coming off of bad losses to good teams on the road. But that's pretty much it with this topic. But once again, I want to remind you guys before we go to break, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show. It's obviously also in the ticker below. And then for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network. And that is where you can find all the exclusive content for all the podcasts on the GSMC Sports Network. But, that's pretty much it with this topic. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are for some of these teams, after this week. So when we come back from our second break, we're going to talk about the Ravens and how far they can go this season. So that'll be what we talk about when we come back from break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens and how far they could go this season. They're coming off of a huge win against the Lions. I mean, they dominated the Lions from start to finish, 38-6. And, that was a game that I thought was going to be competitive, but, I mean, early on you could tell, the Lions have no shot in this game. And the Lions are coming in as we're coming in as one of the hottest teams in the NFL. And the Ravens still have been good. It's just, they had a bad loss against the Colts. They had a bad loss against the Steelers. I mean, it looked like the Titans were going to come back against them in London. But then they went home against the Lions, and they just dominated. I mean, touchdowns I'm pretty sure on their first 4 possessions. And, first 4 possessions, all touchdowns. And, they won 38-6. And, listen, I said I still like the Bengals to win the division. But right now, the Ravens, they already beat them. And, yesterday, on Sunday, they looked like a really good team. The Lions, I mean, they had their chances to sack Lamar Jackson. And he was able to break out. I mean, that touchdown to Nelson Aguilar, if you haven't seen it, you just got to look that up. I mean, it looked like he was going to get sacked. He got out of it and then, throws to Nelson Aguilar. Just that's what he does. He's a playmaker. And, he's looked good this season. He's had a couple of rough moments. I mean, the bad pick in the end zone against the Steelers. The Steelers' loss was very bad. But a lot of that also had to do with the fact that guys that he was throwing to were just dropping the ball. But, the Ravens look good. And, listen, how far can they go? I mean, that's a team that if everything is clicking on all cylinders and they look like the good Ravens, because for me, they're still kind of like that Jekyll and Hyde team. Like, the Steelers game was an example of that. I mean, that's a team they should have beaten the Steelers. They should have, but they didn't. And I don't want to knock the Steelers, but I think the Ravens, they should have won that game. So you got that, but then you go up against the Lions at home, and you score 4 touchdowns on your first 4 possessions, and you dominate them, on both sides of the ball. I think this team could go a long way this year, if they play like the good Ravens. And I think the most important thing too, obviously, it's something that's held them back the last couple of seasons, is the health of their quarterback, Lamar Jackson, because he has missed time the last two seasons because of injury. And I think obviously if he stays healthy, the sky's the limit for what they can do. And they've made improvements, when it comes to their pass catchers. I mean, Zay Flowers has looked like a nice player for them this year. Obviously, you got Odell Beckham Jr. there, too, who's not the same player he once was, but still, a respectable receiver, even though he hasn't been great and he's missed time as well. Nelson Aguilar you brought in as well. I mean, those are upgrades over what they already had, at receiver. Mark Andrews had 2 touchdowns the other day, so they got him going. The one thing I'll say is, obviously, the running back situation, has always been an issue, guys getting hurt. Although Gus Edwards had a very good game the other day. So, I think they could maybe try and, get somebody else. Maybe, a trade possibly to get a running back. But listen, Ravens are a good team. They are a good team. Although they struggle here and there, like I said, they have their Jekyll and Hyde, moments. This is a good team. This is a playoff team as long as Lamar Jackson stays healthy. They still made it with Tyler Huntley last year, and they actually almost beat the Bengals with Tyler Huntley. So right now, they could go far. They can go far. Lamar has beaten Mahomes, and that was something that, the first couple of seasons, I was critical of that. You haven't beaten Mahomes yet. You haven't been able to pull off a comeback. Because when, in the beginning when, the Ravens are down, it's well, they can't come back from this. But, they did that a couple of times over the last couple of seasons. So, they've shown that. Lamar's won a playoff game. And Lamar is he is a top 10 quarterback. He is. And listen, his throwing was definitely something that a lot of people criticized. And at one point for me, I thought Kyler Murray was going to be, a better thrower than he was. But now we see how that's turned out. That's not the case. But the other thing, too, is the Ravens finally are starting to surround him with guys that he could throw the football to. Now, again, I talked about the game against the Steelers. They were dropping passes, but, he's got a nice connection with Zay Flowers, who looks like a nice player for them. So, now they're starting to kind of surround him with more pass catchers, and that's good. So, I mean, listen, I think they could beat anybody. Obviously, if they have to go on the road and play like Kansas City, I mean, obviously I'm going to favor the Chiefs in that game. But, I mean, I think they could go on the road and beat the Bills. I think they could go on the road and beat Miami. Again, those games are going to be tough, but I think they could beat them. And, again, they almost beat Cincinnati on the road last year with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. I think they could – I mean, they lost to the Jags last year, but I think the Ravens could beat them. So, honestly, like, if they're right and they play like they did the other day, I mean, they could beat anybody. They can. So I think they could go very far this year. I mean, I'm not going to say they're going to, but they have the potential to do that. Again, like I said, I still like the Bengals, and, based on, like, teams that I've liked, I talk about how I like the Bucs. Well, now the Bucs are struggling. So, like, I still like the Bengals, but, the Ravens right now are in first place. That's the funny part, too, is the Bengals are in last place in their division, and I still like them. But, again, they're coming off of a bye week, so, again, that was another week for Joe Burrow to rest up and get that calf healthy. So, we'll see. These two teams play each other one more time, and that's in Baltimore. And again, the Ravens already beat them. So, right now it's not – the division is not in the Bengals' favor. And also, especially because, like I said, they're in last place. But, yeah, I mean, if the Ravens – like I said, if the Ravens play like they did the other day, and they don't have a game like – and they're not the Ravens that played against the Steelers, they could beat anybody. They can. So – we'll see what happens, but you got to be impressed with what they did because the Lions coming in, one of the hottest teams in football, Jared Goff playing at an MVP level, and they shut him down. Now, the Lions really didn't have a running game to work with. They were missing, well, Jahmyr Gibbs did play, but David Montgomery, who was running the football well, he wasn't playing. But you got to give the Ravens credit. I mean, they completely shredded that Lions defense. So, for me, they are definitely a dangerous team moving forward. That's a team that I really haven't talked about on the show. I mean, I've been talking about Buffalo, Miami, the Chiefs. I mean, again, signing with the Bengals, saying they're going to win the division, but the other day that was a big win for them. That definitely put a lot of people on notice. And again, that was the good Ravens that showed up. So you get that team. They could beat anybody, but you get the bad Ravens, well, and I did say, like, you don't know what Ravens team you're going to get from week to week, because the Steelers' loss was bad. The Steelers' loss was bad. And the Colts' loss was bad, too. They lost to Gardner Minshew, a backup quarterback, and that was at home. They were like a 7.5-point favorite. And they lost. So, but yeah, for me, I think they could go very far. I think they could get to the Super Bowl. That could be, if this is the Ravens team that they are going forward, they're a Super Bowl contender. They are. But again, like the inconsistencies at times, that's kind of what's going to hold them back a little bit, if that's a problem. And got to keep your quarterback healthy. Lamar Jackson stays healthy. That's going to be what gets them to where they want to be. Because if he gets hurt, well, Tyler Huntley's not leading them to a Super Bowl. That's just not happening. But, we'll see. And they'll make some trades. I would imagine. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, we're approaching the trade deadline. That's in, I believe, a week. So, we'll see if the Ravens, do anything there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll look at their schedule coming up. So obviously, next week, let's see. Next week they play the Cardinals. So that's a winnable game. They should win that game. Then they're home against Seattle. I think they should win that. Home against the Browns. I think they should win that. Home against the Bengals. It's going to be dicey, but we'll see. At the Chargers, I mean, I look at them as the better team, but again, like, Chargers got a high-powered offense, so we'll see. But I think Ravens are the better team. They should win. Then they got their bye. Then they're home against the Rams. The Rams, again, they're not the team they were a couple years ago. So I think the Ravens should win that. At Jacksonville on Sunday night, that's going to be a tough game. But maybe they win it this time. Obviously, last year, like I mentioned before, they lost to Jacksonville. At the 49ers on Christmas, it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a very tough game. That could go either way. Home against the Dolphins. Dolphins, they came back against them last year. Ravens were up big. Dolphins came back and upset them. And then they're home against the Steelers. So that's their upcoming schedule. But yeah, I think this is a team's ultimately going to end up with I would probably say 11, 12 wins, if everything goes right. With the Lamar being healthy. So, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But, I mean, there's definitely tough games there. A lot of primetime games. But, yeah, Ravens look good. Ravens looked good after this week. And obviously, from week to week, it's always going to be something different. I mean, on social media, everyone's how people are always flip-flopping. I mean, rightfully so. Because every week is different. There have been, so many games, so many teams losing certain games, and you're just I have no idea what's going to happen this year. I don't know who's good and who's not. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it with this topic. Ravens, like I said, they play the Cardinals next week. So that's a winnable game for them that they should win. So with that, we'll get into the next topic of the show when we come back from break. We'll discuss the current standings as they are right now after Week 7. I'll give you my thoughts on that, and then that's going to be it for today, the live portion. So with that, we'll take our final break, and then when we come back, that's what we will discuss. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're just going to look at the updated standings after Week 7. So we'll start off in the AFC. So after this week, the Dolphins currently hold a one-game lead over the Bills. Dolphins at 5-2, Bills 4-3, Jets 3-3, Patriots picked up a win against the Bills, 2-5 now on the season. I mean, again, I think it's going to come down to that final game of the regular season between the Dolphins and the Bills. I mean, I still like the Bills to win the division. I don't feel great about it. But, I mean, last year they went into Miami and they lost. The offense just looks. The offense has not been good the last couple of weeks. It really is just. It's been dormant the first 3 quarters, and then they finally wake up. That's a problem. And, the Dolphins, I mean, I talked about it earlier briefly. Against good teams on the road, they've struggled this year. But it's definitely going to be between these 2 teams for the division, I think. I mean, the Jets are 3-3. So, I mean, like, they're a game and a half back. They got an outside chance, but, I mean, I don't look at them as, winning the division here. I mean, listen, they beat Buffalo already. They play Miami on Black Friday. I think that's the first time they play them. Yeah, that is the first time they play them. So, and that's a home game, and the Jets are good at home. So we'll see. But I think right now you look at the Dolphins and the Bills as the top 2 teams that are going to be fighting for the division. I think it's going to come down to the last game of the regular season, and I hope it does, because that would be really exciting. So now we move on to the AFC North. So obviously I just talked about the Ravens. Right now they're 5-2. They lead the way, half game up on the Steelers and the Browns. Bengals are currently in last place, a game and a half back. Listen, I mean, for the Steelers and the Browns, I still look at them as teams that are going to be fighting for the wild card. Browns, they got a big win over the Colts. That was a game they could have easily lost, but they were able to pull it out. They're at 4-2. Steelers 4-2 after winning that huge game against the Rams. They play the Jags at home this week. Browns are going to be at Seattle this week. There's actually no buys on week 8, which I thought was interesting. But, yeah, and then you got the Bengals who are going to be playing against the 49ers, so that's not going to be easy. So, I mean, if the Ravens win, Bengals lose, I mean, the Bengals are going to be 2.5 games back. And I could definitely see that happening. So, I think ultimately it's going to be between the Bengals and the Ravens. Let's see. Yeah, so the Ravens, they finish up the season against the Steelers. Bengals end up finishing the season against the Browns at home. So we'll see how it goes. But, right now, like, I still like the Bengals to win the division, but it's going to be really tough. But, yeah, the Ravens currently lead that at the moment. In the South, it looks like the Jags are going to run away with this thing. I did say, like a couple weeks ago or on one of the past shows that no one's really running away with the South. But the Jags, they found their groove the last couple weeks. And, especially like with Anthony Richardson going down, Tannehill getting injured now for the Titans, and they actually just traded their safety Kevin Byard to the Eagles, so they're selling off guys, so they're out of it. The Texans have already beaten the Jags, so and they're a game and a half back, so they're still in it. I mean, every team is still technically in it, but I think the Jags, they've looked like themselves, like how they're supposed to be the last couple of weeks, and it's ultimately going to be their division. So. They're 5-2. Texans are 3-3. But yeah, Jags, that's going to be their division. Then we go to the AFC West. I mean, again, just another week of the same thing. Kansas City Chiefs are 6-1. Raiders, they looked really bad, losing to the Bears. 3-4 now. Chargers 2-4 after losing to the Chiefs. Broncos actually picked up a win against the Packers, and they play the Chiefs this week. But yeah, nothing really changed drastically in the division. Chiefs are still in first place, and I mean they're gonna run away with this thing. They are running away with this thing. But is it really a surprise? Not really. The defense is playing very well, but actually news with the Chiefs though. So Nick Bolton got hurt in the game, and he's actually gonna miss. I think they said like 6 weeks with a wrist injury. So it says roughly 2 months as I'm looking on CBS, and that's a huge loss for them because he's been a good player for them, their young linebacker. So hopefully he gets back for them because they're gonna need him. And then also actually another thing, Justin Ross, their receiver, he actually got arrested yesterday. He faces a felony charge of criminal damage of more than $25,000. This is what NFL Network reported. And they were expecting big things out of him, and that's just not something that you like to hear. So that's just some news on the Chiefs front. But yeah, they're 6-1. They continue to roll, and right now they have the best record in the AFC. And then we move on to the NFC side of things. The Eagles are currently 6-1. They got that win against the Dolphins. The Cowboys had a bye week. They're 4-2, game and a half back. I mean, right now the Eagles are going to win the division. Cowboys probably get a wild card. Washington's 3-4, Giants 2-5. Hey, Giants, they showed you they have a pulse. That point differential is just so bad, though. 85 points they've scored this year. Their opponents have scored 174 points against them. It's terrible. Terrible. I mean, they won, but they won 14-7. And they scored their first touchdown at home. First 2 touchdowns at home last week. It's awful. Well, this past week, that's awful. Yeah, because look, they got shut out against the Cowboys. They scored 3 points against the Seahawks, and then you win. Against the Commanders, you scored 2 touchdowns. Now you go up against the Jets this week. So we'll see. I mean, listen, I think the game could be close. I mean, am I going to be surprised if the Giants get blown out? No. But for me, the defense has been playing really well. And, they're going up against the Jets team, which they have a very good defense, and their defense can force turnovers. But you know what? Giants' defense has been forcing turnovers as well. And they're going up against a quarterback that, listen, he's kept the Jets afloat for the moment, and the Jets can make the playoffs with their defense and running game, but they could force Zach Wilson into making mistakes, and maybe the Giants steal that game. Because the gauntlet part of their schedule is over. There's a lot of winnable games on that schedule. I shouldn't say a lot, but a decent amount. Because I don't think they'll beat Dallas, and they play Philly twice, in the last 3 weeks. Those are both losses. Because they just can't beat Philly. And we got to watch them on Christmas. That's going to ruin my Christmas is watching the Giants. We had to watch them on Thanksgiving against Dallas last year. Now we got to watch them against the Eagles on Christmas. I mean, come on. Why do you got to do this? Whatever. So let's get into the NFC North. Lions, I mean, listen, that was a bad loss for them, but I think ultimately they're going to win the division. It's their division to lose. Vikings, 3-4 now. They've passed the Packers. They've passed the Bears. Listen, that was a big win against the Niners. And, listen, you get Justin Jefferson back, and you're still in the conversation for the playoffs. I mean, the Vikings could definitely sneak in as the last wild card. And I love how I'm saying this after it looks like they're in for a lost season. Well, now after one game, you're like, well, they got a chance to make the playoffs now. So, but that's what happens from week to week. But yeah, the Lions I think will win the division. Vikings probably fight for a wild card. Packers, I mean, I thought they could maybe get a wild card. Not looking like that right now. They look really bad, especially on offense. The NFC South. Who is going to win that? I have no idea. Because the Bucs, they beat the Saints. Falcons beat the Bucs. I don't know. And the Saints don't look great. I mean, you would think the Saints with their talent, they would be in first place, but they just don't look good. Derek Carr hasn't looked good. He's not on the same page with his receivers. I mean, they're just dumping it off to Kamara, like I was talking about last week. And actually, Chris Olave, he was in the news for the wrong reasons. He was arrested last night for reckless driving. I think it was like on a motorcycle. Yeah, on a yep. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, I'm assuming he's not, going to play on Sunday. I'd be surprised if that happened. But that's just another thing to have to deal with, But yeah, Saints are 3-4 right now. Falcons 4-3, surprisingly. I mean, I didn't even mention it yesterday. I mean, Desmond Ridder didn't throw any interceptions, but he had like 3 fumbles. I don't think he's the answer at quarterback for the Falcons. That's something they're going to have to figure out. Because, I mean, you look at this roster, and now they're also looking into why Bijan Robinson wasn't playing at all during the game, and then towards the end he came back in the game. What happened there? I mean, but anyways, this team is, on paper is good. They got a good roster. It's just they need a quarterback. And Desmond Ridder just does not look like the guy. But the Falcons are 4-3. It's a bad division. Anybody can win it. I mean, the Panthers, right now, they have no shot because they're 0-6. And I honestly, was thinking about picking them as, the favorite to win the division for me. Because, I don't know, I didn't really like the Falcons. The Bucks, they weren't that good last year. And I didn't know how Baker was going to play. And the Saints, I just really didn't trust them with Derek Carr because he wasn't really that good last year. But Panthers have been bad. They're 0-6. Record-wise, they're the worst team in football. I don't look at them as, the worst team in football. But record-wise, they are. Honestly, after this week, I don't even know who the worst team, because the Broncos, the Giants, and the Patriots all won. So, but yeah, I don't know who's going to win the South. Let me know. Who do you think is going to win the South? Because I have no idea. Then we look at the NFC West. Niners are 5-2, so they still hold the lead there. Seahawks are a half game back at 4-2. Rams are 3-4. Cardinals are 1-6. Niners are still going to win the division. They're still going to have a top 2 seed in the NFC. I believe that. They're just going through a rough stretch right now, but definitely, again, something to be concerned about a little bit with the injuries and how Brock Purdy's been turning the ball over the last 2 games. But I think they're better than all these teams in the division. Seattle, I look at them as a wild card team. Rams, same thing. So let's go through the wild card really quickly. So the Steelers, the Browns, and the Bills all hold wild card spots. Bills have the last wild card spot at the moment. That's so weird to look at. And then you got, the Texans, the Jets, and the Bengals all 1 game back. Colts, Raiders, Titans. Colts and Raiders are 1.5 games back. Titans and Chargers are 2 games back. Broncos and Patriots are 2.5 games back. Yeah, Bills got to be careful because, they lose again. They might find themselves on the outside looking in for the moment. And they play on Thursday against the Bucks at home. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's the wild card in the AFC right now. Then the NFC, you got the Seahawks, the Cowboys, and the Bucks holding wild card spots. Vikings, Rams, Commanders, and Saints are all a game and a half back. Packers are 2 games back. Giants are 2.5 games back. Bears are 2.5 games back. Cardinals are 3.5. Panthers are 4. Cardinals and Panthers. Bears. Sorry, Giants, but you guys too. And the Packers. So a lot of these teams, I don't really look at them as teams that are really going to be fighting for a playoff spot based off of how they're playing and what their records are. So all the teams that are 3-4, those are the teams right now you got to focus on. And now if those teams win next week, some of those teams maybe, and they close the gap a little bit, then we might be having a different conversation. But right now the teams that are a game and a half back, those are the ones you got to focus on for that final wild card spot, because the Bucks are 3-3 and they could lose this week against the Bills. So that's pretty much it with the current standings. And with that, that is all the time that we have for today. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, we'll be back again tomorrow talking some more football. And yeah, so I'm going to go record the Patreon portion now of the show. So as always, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.